Hello, everybody. This is Barbershop Books story time with me, Alvin Irby. But today we actually have a special guest. And when I say a special guest, I really mean a special guest. Our guest today is a jazz saxophonist. Now, what in the world is jazz and what is a saxophone? Well, jazz is a type of music that was started here in the United States. And a saxophone is a type of musical instrument. I'm really excited because we're actually going to have a special guest. And our special guest for today is actually a jazz saxophonist. And so you'll get a chance not only to listen to a really cool story. Here it is. It's called Before John Was a Jazz Giant. But you'll also get an opportunity to hear a really cool musician who loves to play the saxophone. Why in the world did I ask a saxophonist to come and play with me today? Well, it's because the saxophonist who I invited today, he reminded me a lot of John Coltrane. So he's going to be joining us during today's read aloud, and you're going to get a chance to listen to him. So the name of the story for today is called Before John Was a Jazz Giant. This story is about everything that happened that made John Coltrane want to play music and the different sounds that he heard. And if you look at the cover, you'll see that he's holding something that looks like a saxophone. Do you see it? It looks kind of clear. It's like an outline of a saxophone. Let's see. He heard ham bones knocking in grandma's pots. Do you know what ham bones are? Ham bones are the bones that are inside a ham. And so I guess as somebody was cooking, it says knocking in grandma's pot. So as his grandma was cooking, he could hear, oh, I think that, there we go. And it says knocking in grandma's. There we go. Hey. His grandma was cooking.
Hey, Stefan, how are you?
Hey. So we have our guest with us today. Wave at everybody, Tavon.
Hey, man. What's up? How's everybody doing?
So Tavon Petticott is our Pennicott. Did I say that right?
Yeah,
okay.
Tavon Petticott
Is our guest for today's story. And so as I'm reading, you're going to get a chance to hear him play the saxophone. So let's get back to the story. Before John was a jazz giant, he heard ham bones knocking in his grandma's pots. Daddy strumming the ukulele. What in the world is a ukulele? And Mama cranking the phonograph. Well, a ukulele is like a really tiny guitar. Do you see that man playing that tiny looking guitar? That's a ukulele. And do you see those bones flying around the pot? Well, that's his grandma cooking up some stuff. And if you look at John, you'll see that he has music swirling around in his head because he's hearing all these different sounds. Tavon.
Yeah.
When you feel the music swirling around in your head, what does it make you think about? Let us hear something.
Oh, man. It's something like...
Wow. That's so cool. Okay. Before John was a jazz giant, he heard steam engines whistling past, Cousin Mary giggling at Jittlebuggers, and Bojangles tap dancing in the picture show. And so for John, he hears music everywhere that he goes. When he's at the movie theater, picture show, that's what they used to call the movie theater like a long, long time ago. But as he's at the picture show and he sees people tap dancing and he sees people dancing, all these things remind him of different sounds. Let's see what happens next. Before John was a jazz giant, he heard Grandpa's Sunday sermons, Mama playing hymns for the senior choir, and scoutmasters calling to join a band. So for John, everywhere he went, even when he went to church, even when he heard the band, all of these different sounds would just swirl around in his head. And he didn't know it at that time, but he would eventually become one of the best jazz musicians to ever play. And it wasn't just about what he was thinking, but it was about all the sounds that were coming in all the time. Tavon, when you're walking around your neighborhood, maybe for a walk, or when you're going different places, visiting somewhere new, what do some of those sounds make you think about?
Sounds like.
Wow, that was cool. All right, let's see what happens next. Before John was a jazz giant, he heard birds warbling at sunrise. Warbling? Warbling, that's such an interesting word. Warbling? You know, I'm trying to imagine, what does it even sound like to warble? I have no idea. But you know what? The next time I hear birds making sounds, I'm going to listen really, really close to see if I hear a bird warble. That's such a funny word. The sobs of kinfolks and at family funerals, and cheers as he marched in parades. So where John lived, sometimes they would have parades and he would march in those different parades. Before John was a jazz giant, he heard big bands on the radio and a saxophone's soulful solo, blue notes crooning his name. So as John listened to the radio, he heard a saxophone solo. But what's a saxophone solo? Well, in a jazz band, there are lots of musicians playing different instruments. And sometimes they play all together, making a nice groove, making everybody want to move and maybe tap your feet, or maybe even clap your hands. Or sometimes the music might make you just move your head a little bit up and down, or even side to side. Well, you know what? Because we have a really cool saxophonist with us today, Tavon, do you think you could give us a saxophone's soulful solo? Could you try that for us? Wow. Doesn't that make you want to move? It definitely makes me want to move. Musicians can find inspiration anywhere and everywhere. Are there sounds that inspire you, that make you want to move or even sing? I'm not going to sing. But there's music that when I hear it, it does make me want to sing. But I feel like I'm more of a shower kind of singer instead of, singing out in front of a lot of people. Let's find out what else happens to jazz, to John Coltrane. Before John was a jazz giant, he picked up that horn. Well, John Coltrane didn't just pick up any type of horn, but he picked up a saxophone. If you've never, ever, ever seen a saxophone, well, guess what? You have today, because our guest, Tavon, he's holding one right now. Tavon, can you show us your saxophone?
Woo.
After we finish the story, Tavon's going to tell us all the different parts of the saxophone. And he's going to tell us what the different parts do. So let's keep reading and find out what it was like before John was a jazz giant. Before John was a jazz giant, he picked up that horn, blew into the mouthpiece, pressed his fingers on the keys, and breathed every sound he'd ever known into a bold new song. Wow. So, saxophone players and other musicians, they take all the different sounds that they've heard and they mix them into songs to make people feel happy and feel good. And even a saxophonist or any type of musician can use their playing to make us feel all types of emotions. They can make us feel happy. They can also make us feel sad. They can make us feel lots of energy by going really fast. Or they can slow down and give us a nice, soulful little groove. There's so many things that a musician can do with the sounds that they make out of their instruments. Before John was a jazz giant, and here's the pictures. Can you see John? This is when he picked up a saxophone. And if you look, you can see that there are notes, little notes coming out of his saxophone. Before John was a jazz giant, he was all ears. And guess what? That is the end of today's story. And do you see John right there? Before he was a jazz giant, he was all ears. What does that mean, that he was all ears? Well, when it comes to playing music, no matter what kind of music it is, in order to play, you have to also listen. And it's the same thing with a lot of things. Before someone becomes a writer, they read a lot. So today, we have a really, really, really amazing jazz saxophonist who's here with us today. And he is going to tell us a little bit about the saxophone. So Tavon, can you tell us about a saxophone? What are the parts of a saxophone? And then maybe you can just play a little something for us.
Sure. That was an incredible story. I enjoyed it. It's good. First of all, in order to produce a sound on a saxophone, the saxophone is classified as a woodwind instrument. But you see, it's like it's all metal. It's like it's all metal, and how could this be woodwind? Well, the way that you make a sound is through what we call a reed. You look here, this is a saxophone reed. It's a wooden slab here, and what you do is you have to make sure that it's nice and moist and wet so that it can vibrate and produce a sound. I've already got a reed here. And this blue thing, right, that you see, this blue thing is what you call the mouthpiece. So the reed, the wooden reed, connects on to the mouthpiece here, and it allows it to create a sound. Now, without the saxophone, with just the mouthpiece, I can make a sound. It's going to sound like a different sound, but it's going to be a sound. Check it out. Yeah. That's just the mouthpiece. That's the reed and the mouthpiece. So now we get to the saxophone. This part that I'm taking off here, it's called the neck.
Oh, cool.
The neck of the saxophone. So, second thing, we put this onto this thing, what is called the cork. We put the mouthpiece onto the cork. This also makes a sound, but since it's getting bigger, it's a little lower. Here we go. So now for the final piece. This is what really makes a saxophone a saxophone. We have what we call the body. This is one big piece that we need in order to do that. So we connect the reed, the mouthpiece, and the neck onto the body of the saxophone, just like that. And once we do that, we're ready to go. And it sounds, as you know, like this. Now you're probably wondering, how do you change all those notes, and how do you make all the different sounds and all the music? Well, this is so complicated. If you look really closely, there are all these buttons, but we call them keys, where it allows you to do different combinations. So one note might be with one finger, another note might be with two fingers, another note might be with four fingers, another note might be with one finger off, two fingers on, you know?
Wow. So there's lots of different ways that you can make different notes. So my question for you today, Tavon, is can you play some John Coltrane for us? Is there a John Coltrane part of a song that you really love and that you want all the children to know that you could play a part of for everybody here today?
Yeah, there's this song. It's a kind of a upbeat song that I love from John Coltrane. It's not necessarily some of the most famous ones that you would hear, but I really like this one because it feels good. This one's
What's
called,
the name of the?
It's called Cousin Mary.
Cousin Mary.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That was so amazing. For those of you who have been tuning in you've been tuning into Barbershop Book Story Time. Today, I read Before John Was a Jazz Giant. And this is a song to John Coltrane. Every single week on Tuesdays and Fridays at 11 a.m., we have Barbershop Book Story Time. I'm so very excited that that we were able to have our special guest today, Tavon Pennicott, to play some amazing John Coltrane for us and to introduce us to the saxophone. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time. Bye.